I formally open the meeting, please? Unfortunately, the Chair and Vice Chair are both unable to attend the meeting today. So could I have a nomination from panel members, please, for a chairman for the meeting? So it's moved, Councillor Holmes. Is that seconded?
I'll second Councillor Holmes.
Okay. Councillor Holmes, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're all looking good. We'll start with the agenda. Apologies, please, Amanda.
I've received apologies from councillors.
Don't take too long.
Councillors Peters, Adams, Cox, Councillor Doyle, who sent a substitute, Tina Clements, and Councillor Hudson.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Zero. Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Approval, please. Everybody's read through them. Can I have someone to? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Questions to the PFCC from members of the public. Do we have any?
We've received no questions this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to the Commissioner are invited from members. Do we have any questions at the moment for the Commissioner? No? That's good. That's good. We're getting on here now. This could be done with 5 past. Right. Decisions published by the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. Any questions on those? I am on 5 on my agenda. No, that's 6. Is it? Can you just check that agenda for me, please? That's the one. Thank you very much. Okay, are we all right now? It's all right. Happy? Oh, I've forgotten where I was now. Decisions published by the Police and Fire and Crime Commissioner. Any questions on those? Anne, I believe you had one. On, please, Anne.
Yes, my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Stafford, on Hydrant Way, the Stafford fire station is going to be sold, and the main part of the fire station, where that area where the fire engines are, they're going to be moved in the smaller building to the side. And that land will be sold. So I can't see anywhere in here where that is proposed or in the budget. Am I correct or am I wrong?
Mr. Chairman, if I could come in, I think that's on a different part of the agenda, and I think this is just to do with the child exploitation and missing person service. I think the Chairman was asking you about.
Yeah, sorry, I do apologise. Yes, the child exploitation...
Excuse me, Anne. We are on item 5 and your question was on child exploitation.
Yes, Chairman, I do apologise.
It's all right.
You're absolutely right. I just want to comment on that, actually, and shall I say, compliment the Commissioner in the work that's been done on that. It is so important, you know, with children missing and the amount of work that you're prepared to put in. I accept that with, you know, on behalf of the group, I think, on behalf of the committee, that we're really pleased that more effort has been put into that. And can I say, I think I've mentioned before on Regulation 44 visits, the children in visiting the children's care homes and that, you know, the number of children that go missing in the middle of the night and that, and the amount of police time that's spent on that. So can I say a big thank you, actually, Commissioner, for taking this on board and putting someone in place to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman, and thank you, Anne. I visited the organisation that leads on this for us, called Catch-22, the other day. They're national experts, and what's unique, I think, or only a few of the places have followed our lead with this, is combining the child, particularly sexual exploitation, and the children's missing service into one commission. And I heard from them why that's so important. When a child goes missing, and it may be from a care arena, but also quite often from home, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, and all of them have an interview on returning home. It's absolutely essential that they have an interview with somebody who understands their experience and gets underneath what's causing them to have gone missing. And quite often it is related to issues where they feel threatened or worries particular about exploitation. So combining the two services is really important. They work very closely with the police and others, and we think it's absolutely fundamental to intervening early, particularly in the interest of in Staffordshire, because we've got quite a number of care homes, and actually it's not all Staffordshire children that are in them. We have a lot of out-of-county care home residents. They are more inclined to go missing, quite often seeking to get back to their own locality. So that wraparound service is really important for them. I was so impressed with the service, so impressed with the individuals involved. And you're right, they do a fantastic job for young people who are exceptionally vulnerable. It's why we commission and why we're going to keep commissioning.
Thank you for that reply, Commissioner. Any more questions on that? No, thank you. The next item is proposed fire and rescue budget and precept. So that's over to you, Commissioner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations on your rapid rise. Right, revenue budget. Key moment, really, for me. First time to have a good look at the opportunity to share my review of the finances over the last 9 months or so. Very much taking a similar approach to the one I shared with you around the police a couple of weeks ago, of looking at the budget as certainly within my term for the next 2.5 years, but hopefully well into the future, and try and set up the fire and rescue service with something that is sustainable and deliverable. The work that the service has done has changed quite a bit in recent decades. As we know, there are fewer fires, thank goodness, but there are a lot of other challenges, and the service, I believe, is now stepping rightly into spaces where they are really offering services that keep people safe in many different ways. We've got the challenges of climate change, we've got more flooding, we've got wider area fires, a lot of regional support for incidents of that nature, because they can often take days and weeks to deal with. And a real sense through the pandemic that the service is stepping into ever more capacity around targeting prevention, safety and health in the home. And I've talked before at this meeting, and I'm going to keep talking about the opportunities that fire and rescue have to better serve the public in the future around public health and around working more closely with ambulance and NHS. We're making some progress with that. I must say in some areas more quickly and in some areas not as quickly as I would like, but I think the moment is correct. I'd really like to thank the firefighters and staff, not just for what they've done for the public during the pandemic, but for being ever present. They have run sometimes, quite often on overtime. They've run in smaller numbers than they might like in some occasions, but always available, like so many frontline services. They've done a tremendous job. And I think when you look at some of the detail we'll get to later on, thousands and thousands of vaccinations, help with flu vaccinations, drop-in centres, things like that, they've really stepped up to the plate. I think the frontline firefighters would like to do more than that, more of that. They would like to be involved in that world where they can use their professionalism. So with that in mind, government is in a... we're waiting on a white paper, I keep saying that, thought it might be out about 6 months ago, where I think the opportunities for the service to flex will be clearly articulated by government. I think they're looking for improved performance management, more standards being adopted across the country, ways of comparing services. With that in mind, they're also conscious perhaps that more can be done with the existing budgets. So finances for fire and rescue has been tight for a little while. It stays tight. We're restricted to a maximum increase of 1.99%. Now, ordinarily, 2 or 3 years ago, that would have felt like a comfortable way of absorbing additional costs. Right now, it isn't. That is considerably under where we are with inflation at the moment, and cost inflation as well as pay rises. So I've proposed or consulted on 1.99%. That equates to £1.57 a year for a Band D property. So you might say that's actually not a lot of money, but when you look at the funding for the fire service, the majority of it does come from local council taxpayers. It is very much driven by not just council tax, but also business rates, again, local business rates. So it's one of these services that's embedded in the community. I think with that increase and a continuation to make efficiencies, to share building services with the police and others, to consider some evolving ways of crewing, that we can get to where we need to be in 5 years' time. They need to make £2 million more savings on top of what I'm expecting to ask or thinking we'll be asking the public for in the next 4 or 5 years. So it's not a small task. We still need to make more savings, but I'm hoping that residents will appreciate that this is a absolutely vital service, one that we rely on, and we would want to keep it properly resourced. So 1.99% is my proposal this year, and going forward over the 5 years. We need some savings to achieve a balanced budget at the end of that point, but I think it's reasonable to get there. I consulted on this, and 70% of respondents supported the 1.99% increase, so I think it's got public support. Now, I wonder, Chairman, if I might ask David, who's the finance lead for my office, but also for fire, so he knows the detail, if he might just take us through 1 or 2 of the key items in the report, and then I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. David, would you like to?
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Chair. So, as I did with the police report a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to sort of take all of the 4 budget papers together. So, the detail I'll run through relates and covers the detail that's within all 4 of those papers, if that's okay with everybody. So, firstly, I think I'm very pleased to present a balanced budget to you, to the panel today, for the coming year, 22-23. So the budget proposals that are in front of you for the panel today is for a revenue budget of 42.472 million. Now that's based upon the local government finance settlement when the papers were written, but we have received the final settlement now, and I'm pleased to say there are no changes following receipt of the final settlement that need to make any changes to the budget proposals that are in front of you today. So as the Commissioner has just said, in terms of the council tax position, the proposed Band D increase is £1.57 per year, so 3 pence per week, and that will take the Band D up to £80.35 for fire and rescue. The MTFS assumes that increase will remain throughout the medium term, so we're sticking at that 1.99% assumption. And that's primarily because there's been no flexibility offered to the fire and rescue sector, apart from there's a few fire and rescue services that sit within the lower quartile of Band D that have been allowed to put, as a one-off, to put £5 on the council tax for 22-23. So, as the Commissioner says, overall the proposed increases for council tax, when compared against pay awards and RPI, and that's included within on page 8 of the report, it's well below both of those expectations as we move into the medium term. I think it's also important just to note as well that some positive information around council tax that I know you're all aware of, but we have seen a bounce back from the pandemic, which has resulted in a 1.84% increase in the council tax base and a small surplus of 288,000 for fire and rescue for the budget year. As the Commissioner says, the proposed budget and the medium term include the requirement to deliver £2 million worth of savings into the medium term. And if the panel remember, that's absolutely in line with the position that I reported to you back in December of last year. And contained within the report, we've got quite some detailed analysis of the service transformation and the proposals that are being put forward and will be discussed with the Commissioner in more detail over the coming year. The budget for next year does include a small use of reserves in year of 400,000, with an overall draw on reserves of 300,000 during the MTFS period. Now, in terms of that use of reserves, why it's been necessary, it's primarily been necessary because there's been some volatility in the business rates receipts that are coming forward for next year. So we have seen quite a significant reduction following the receipt from the billing authorities for the NNDR1 returns. So we've seen quite a significant reduction, primarily driven by a deficit in the collection fund on those business rates. Now, in terms of the building authorities' position, we know they have been in receipt of grants that cover off part or most of the shortfall in business rates, but it needs to be a little bit clearer how that's actually going to materialise and come through and come back to the fire and rescue service. So there's some uncertainty there, and we've covered that off in the short term by the small use of reserves. There's also an increase in the Section 31 receipt in terms of the business rates grants that come through, and then we'd also assume that the business rates would be marginally down. So we've got a position that we're happy with at the moment in terms of the medium term, but there is still further clarity and further information that's required regarding that business rates position. But that's shown on page 7 of the report. So if I can just highlight one or two significant risks that do still remain within the budget and the medium-term financial strategy. Firstly, we've got pay awards. We've also got pensions. We've got cost increases. And also we've got the proposed funding review that's going to be undertaken by government. I think it's fair to say, and I'll cover off a little bit more detail in a moment about some of those areas, particularly around pay and pensions. But I think if I could ask the panel just to note the assumptions that are contained within page 15 of the report, because that does lay out the proposals around pay and pensions and costs as we move forward. The Commissioner has already said as well about engagement with the local community, and details of that are also contained within the report. So if I may, Chair, I'm just going to move on to one or two other key areas that are contained within the report before we move forward to any questions for myself or the Commissioner. I think firstly it's important to recognise that the budget process again has been undertaken with budget holders across the Fire and Rescue Service. The budget's been built up from a zero base as it is done on an annual basis anyway. So we do build that up from the ground upwards. It's important as well that the Commissioner and the Fire and Rescue Service have considered the key corporate risks when we've established the budget and also the assumptions within the medium-term financial strategy. As we just talked about, two of the main risks be pay and pensions. And it's worth noting that pay and pensions do make up 68% of the overall fire and rescue budget. So the considerable risk sits around the biggest cost area for the service. Just to give you a little bit of detail, the budget does assume a 3% pay award for all staff for 22-23. Now, some people will remember that's actually slightly lower than what we presented for the police budget. The police budget was put forward at 4%. And it's slightly lower because the Fire and Rescue Service actually received a 1.5% pay award for operational staff during the current financial year, whereas the police didn't receive a pay award. So that really just explains the disparity between the assumptions between fire and police. In addition as well, the Commissioner has created a pension reserve that currently sits at £1.8 million and also has included an assumption that employer pension contributions will increase from 24.5 by 5%. And I'll just mention that a little bit more detail in a moment or so. So this increase really just reflects the additional costs that are expected following the Sergeant and McLeod age discrimination case, and also makes some estimates around the impact of the latest firefighter pension revaluation, which was undertaken in 2020, the results of which we've not fully seen yet. So there are some assumptions there that we're having to make around what this is going to look like in the future, and we're basing that on the best intelligence and information that we've got at the moment. But of course, as I say, both pensions does represent a significant risk as we move into the medium term. So, Chairman, if I can just move on to service transformation. Service transformation will remain key during the budget year and into the medium term in order to deliver the £2 million worth of savings that the Commissioner mentioned earlier. Pages 11 and 12 of the report include some further detail around that transformation work and how transformation work is also supported by the capital investment decisions that are included within the paper. The work aligns with the corporate safety plan and also the Commissioner's plan to deliver a fire service that is ready for tomorrow and is both more efficient and, importantly, delivers higher productivity as we move forward. And, of course, importantly, there will also be continued even more flexible use of the combined estate across both police and fire. If I just move on to reserves, overall the reserves positions remain fairly stable for the last 3 years, with a general reserve that sits at 1.9 million and an earmarked or a more specific reserve that sits at 7.5 million. Reserves primarily have been utilised to support the investment programme, and that strategy continues into the medium term. But of course we have got other areas of priority for reserves, of which one I mentioned earlier being the pension reserves at 1.8 million. So the reserves position is clearly laid out within the strategy report that's in front of you, and I'm happy obviously to take any questions regarding the reserves or the reserve strategy today. If I could just move on to the capital programme now. And we have got quite a significant capital programme that's laid out in front of you in Appendix 8 and 9 of the report, and also the accompanying reserves strategy report. So the total capital programme is estimated for next year, the proposed programme, at £8 million, and that includes investment within our estate, within operational equipment, within transport, and also within ICT. I think it's fair to say as well, and I'd just like to point out to the panel that lower levels of capital spend, primarily during the last 2 years, has resulted in a bit of a build-up in capital spend. So we have got some deferred spend that's been brought forward from the last 2 years that has resulted in a probably a bigger programme than we would have liked for 22-3. So that will give us some significant challenges around delivering that total programme. So I'll just pick out one or two of the key areas within the programme, if that's okay. So firstly, and Councillor, you mentioned Stafford Fire Station. So there is the project for Stafford Fire Station remains within the programme. So what that will see is a smaller fire station on the existing estate. So within the current annex building where we have occupational health services and we did have the civil contingencies unit, the proposal is to remodel that smaller area into a response base, but it will obviously be a smaller response base with a proposal to dispose of the current fire station, which will obviously result in more efficient revenue, lower revenue costs as we move forward, and importantly as well, will release a capital receipt upon disposal of that land. So that's the proposal that's incorporated within the programme. We've also got two refurbishment pieces of work. Firstly, at Abbots Bromley, where we've got facilities there that are not suitable for female firefighters. So we've been working on Abbots Bromley for quite a while now, but we have got a project that hopefully is going to start very soon and will be delivered in the early part of the current year. We're also working on Brood as well, because Brood again is a fire station that's quite old and also needs some minor refurbishment work. So we're hoping that we can get that project together, and that'll start probably towards the end of the budget year 22-3. So that'll start sort of in quarter 4 of the year. We're also, as well, when we look at operational firefighting equipment, the personal protective equipment, so the equipment, the clothing that the firefighters wear to keep them safe, needs replacing. So we've got quite a significant investment programme to replace that PPE over during the budget year and into 23-4 as well. We've also got 2 new appliances that are being procured with enhanced rescue capabilities that are again part of the service transformation work. And finally, we've also got some quite significant investment in 2 new aerial ladder platforms, and that contract work has been successful. So that tender is all as has now been let, because that's one of the big pieces of the work that's been carried over from a previous year. The capital programme, I'm pleased to say, is supported by the Treasury Management Strategy that I can signpost you to that sits alongside this report. So finally, if I'd just like to make some closing comments. So the budget report in front of you, within Appendix 1, we can see the budget and how it's scheduled. The reserve strategies for the general and the earmark reserve are within Appendix 2 and 3. Appendix 4, 5 and 6 lay out the precept detail in terms of the precept base and the proposed precept bands, and the detailed medium-term financial strategy is contained within Appendix 7. Can I also ask the panel to note the statement made by myself in paragraphs 49 and 50 of the report regarding the robustness of the budget paper and the proposals that are in front of you. Finally, I'm happy to take any questions, and if I can just refer the panel back to the recommendation within the report for the panel to support the proposed increase in council tax of £1.57, which will increase the bandee to £80.35. Thank you very much, Chairman, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for, what can I say, a very full and comprehensive report by you and the Commissioner. Thank you very much. Councillor Edgeler, did that answer all your questions?
I think it did, Chairman. Thank you for that, and thank you for your presentation on the report. And yes, I think it did answer the question that I wanted to ask, and I'm sorry for the confusion before. Could I ask another question, a follow-on question? Cladding, do we invest or do we put any money into any buildings that need recladding because of fire risks or anything? Just to, Thank you, Chairman.
Commissioner?
No, not directly funding, but obviously it's a fire risk that we've got an eye to. There aren't any major sites across the whole of the county or city that I'm aware of that are affected by that, thank goodness, unlike some other places. And we'll talk about some of the similar building related things like sprinklers and so on in a later item on the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, do we have any questions? Thank you, Adrian.
Good afternoon, Adrian Bowen, independent member of the panel. Can you help me to understand something, please? On Appendix 7, the MTFS summary, there are 2 lines of efficiency plan savings, pay and non-pay, quite a considerable sum. And then you talked earlier about the £2 million saving coming out of the transformation programme. I'm just trying to understand, please, what's the relationship between those numbers? Is one included in the other?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm happy to come back on that. So in terms of that overall efficiency saving line, so we've got, as you say, we've got it split between pay and non-pay, but that is all, it's all related. So the transformation work that is ongoing will deliver that £2 million worth of savings into the medium term. So if you look at the total delivery across the pay and the non-pay, that comes back to the £2 million which is required into the medium term. So you can see that builds up. So we have got a small requirement of circa 300,000 for the budget year as part of the initial work for the service transformation, which then builds into the medium term.
Thank you. Could I just ask then that the 2 million, is that an optimistic forecast, a conservative forecast? How confident do we feel about that? It's judgmental, I know that.
It's not easy, but it's also not a stretch target. I think it's a sensible target. There's a good record in recent years of making savings. Some of the projects that you've heard about already around sharing estates and operational opportunities for us, really focusing the delivery around risk should make those savings achievable. I'm very conscious when approving budgets that they should contain as little as possible in terms of underestimating cost increases and overestimating savings. And I think, if anything, we err on the prudent side in both, but it's better than any nasty surprises. This is a quite substantial piece of work, actually, to get to these savings. There's ongoing conversations. There are a number of options I'm considering, some of which we won't take forward, some of which I think will are appropriate, and I think the public will back them. So it's a case of getting there to a good value service. And I'll just go back to my comment earlier. Government has a sense that this service can deliver a high quality service on a slightly lower spend. I say this service, I mean fire and rescue nationally. So this is very much a direction of travel that is expected and required.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for that answer. Is there anyone else? Go on, Brian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Brian Jones, Cannock Chase District Council. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good afternoon, David. Could I just refer you to page 25 and Appendix 1, please? We've just touched on pay efficiency and non-pay efficiency. There's a figure there in column 2 and column 3 of £156,000. Could you just, it's a very precise figure, could you just explain how we've come by that figure and the specifics of it? I think it may be a matter for you, David.
Yeah, I'll start with that, Chairman, if I may. That 156, that carries through to Appendix 7 that your colleague Adrian just asked us about. So that's the anticipated savings, the scheduled savings that we believe we can make this year coming forward. And absolutely, that's down, well, at this stage, it's getting down to the detail of individual role profiles. There's some changes to the senior leadership mix, and it'll be down to the detail of a few individual staffing choices. David, do we have any more detail on that?
I haven't really got anything to add. It does seem like quite a precise number, and it is, because it's backed up by the information that we've utilised to calculate both the short and into the medium term savings. So I admit it is quite a specific figure, but we have got the detail that sits behind that.
Can you put your microphone on, please?
I think that both figures were the same, was why I sort of asked the question.
And the simple answer for that is we got a total saving requirement that's just been split between pay and non-pay. At the moment that there's no more intelligence behind it than that, so it's just a split. It's just an even split.
Thank you very much. Keith, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Keith Walker, independent member. On the recurring revenue budget, Appendix 1, there are two lines, one for premises costs of 3.9 million and one for PFI unitary charge, which I suspect are both sort of premises related costs. Can you explain how they're made up and what the difference is between the two?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think it's if I start with the unitary charge cost first, if that's okay. So in terms of how that charge is made up, overall we've got within the fire and rescue service we've got 21 PFI stations. So we've got two PFI contracts. So what you see there is the unitary charge that's payable for both of those contracts. Now within that PFI payment is the cost of the facilities management as well as life cycle costs. So basically there's the full cost of maintaining and keeping those fire stations in the condition that they are during the unitary charge period. Now that's not the complete payment, by the way, because we do receive a £7 million grant every year during the concessionary period for our PFI projects. So there's a payment of £10 million, of which £7 million is covered off by the government grant that we receive every year, which leaves that residual £3 million that's covered off by the service. But that is the full, if you like, the operating costs, includes the running costs of these stations. Whereas when we look at the premises costs, the 3.9 million, what you see in there is the cost of our residual estate, there's headquarters, there's our joint emergency transport department, there's jets at Trentham Lakes as well. So you've got the business rates costs and just the general running costs for the estate as well. These includes things like the detail, like the gritting costs, for example. So that's the full cost of the remaining parts of the estate. But also as well, within that premises cost, you've got things like the lighting, the heating, the utility costs, which obviously as well are increasing because what we're seeing is the increase in prices and the inflationary impact of cost generally as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else?
Roger Lee, Staffordshire. I noticed you've made some assumptions for to get a balanced MTFS. What are the assumptions you've made after the first year to keep a balanced budget?
I'll just start, David, and you pick up if you would. I think the most significant one, Roger, is on page 18 of the document. We've got the pay budget there. So there's assumptions that pay award around 3%. That's the most notable. Okay. So if we look at have you got a table of the percentages, David, or is it just back to the? I think your page numbering's different to mine. There we go. That's the one you want, Roger. It's on our page 23. So we're taking 3% through for the next 3 years, and then it's reducing down to 2. You can also see there's some related pension costs and so on. And similarly, we've got cost increases around some of the operating costs, so electricity, gas, etc. And you can see there's a big whack expected. And we're already experiencing that on electricity and gas. And then they balance out. So they're a prudent set of assumptions. I guess the one that, the interesting one is towards the bottom, which David referenced earlier, around the local business rates. You can see there we've actually had a negative impact and then a slight increase again, we hope, as business rates, government grants and other things are repaid as a result of the support given during COVID. So it's that big table on page 23.
I have a supplementary question. What contingency have you made if we don't meet those targets?
Well, I think if I can just refer the panel back to primarily in terms of the contingency, well, we sit with our reserves. So if something significant happened, let's say, let's think of an event, possibly a 5-6% pay award that happened next year, for example, is that sort of thing that you're looking for? So if there was a significant assumption that was outside of our medium term, then we would have to use reserves in the short term, and then we'd have to rethink our strategy as we take things forward. So we have got a reserves that we can utilise in the short term, but of course, we'd need some plans, significant plans, if pay awards came in at 5%, because obviously at some point, that would not be sustainable. So we would need to readdress our saving plans and requirements.
Roger, if I may, it's absolutely the right question. I mean, we budget and we forecast. We do it prudently and we try and take account of possible fluctuations, but we can't know everything. I mean, we wouldn't have known 2 years ago the energy implications. And there are businesses out there where energy is everything. If you're making bricks or something, and suddenly you're paying 2-3 times the cost for gas, it completely kills your budget. Now, this is a people business primarily, so the one that could really influence this plan is pay settlements, and I think we are in a position of some extremely difficult conversations around that. There was a pay settlement last year for firefighters, which was not in our budgets nationally, was not expected. Government's expectation was no rises, and yet one was approved by the local government-backed NJC, of which police and crime commissioners at the time had no influence. I was not very pleased, because that's 1.5%. I think it turned out to be about £750,000, David, that we just had to find in year. So that's 750 grand that's still there to be saved. So these agreements and negotiations, they have to be made with very open eyes, that we can only ask the public for a certain amount more. We have a certain amount of service level we want to achieve, and only so much can give if the settlements are unreasonable. So I think it's a sensible question, and it goes to the heart of the difficulty with budgets. You do your best. I don't think there's anything in here which suggests we're taking any risks or being a little light. I expect, and I've seen allowances in other places, particularly for police budgets, around pay that are quite low, and I think they are likely to have a bit of a cold bath. I'm hoping we won't, but it really doesn't matter. We have some sensible agreements, and I hope to goodness inflation comes straight within 6-12 months, so that people can appreciate that this isn't forever, but it could be for a while yet.
Mr. Councillor Lees, does that cover everything?
Yes, I think it does.
I think you've had a very comprehensive answer, actually.
It's something we're all having to deal with at the moment, and it's very relevant. And thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please excuse me, it was $250,000, not $750,000 for that pay settlement. Still a lot of money.
Can I have the difference? We've got some other things going on. Sorry, Keith, please.
Thank you, Chair. The line on general income, £3.3 million, how does the fire service generate £3.3 million of income?
So I'll just make sure that I reference that. Yeah, I've got. So in terms of the what's included within our income, there are a number of aspects to that, and there are a number of changes as well that's happened this year as well. So what we've seen this year is one of the reasons why the income's actually gone up slightly in year is because we've received or we will be in receipt of what's called a special services grant, and it's a good point actually. So thank you for that, because I didn't mention it. So we will receive £663,000 worth of special service grant that has been issued as an unring-fenced grant, but it's primarily been given to us to cover off the national insurance increase, so the 1.25%. So the 1.25% is around about £200,000 for fire, and what we've done is we're not using all of it in year, but we're going to leave some as a unapplied grant, so that we've got some for the year after and the year after as well. So that's an amount that we've got as an increase this year. We also get the business rates Section 31 grants as well that come through, so that can be around about £1 million as well that comes through from general income. We've got income that we receive for a small amount of income for things like the use of our conference facilities, for example. We've got income that comes in from policing because of the service level agreement that we've got at Hanley, at Tamworth, and across a number of other stations as well. We've got arrangements with CCU, with occupational health. So we've got a number of areas where we receive income for the use of our buildings and the use of our assets, etc. Primarily, we don't go out and generate a significant amount of income through other activities as a fire and rescue service. There is some, and that's contained actually within appendix, the final appendix on the report, where you can see basically the fees and charges for things where we actually go out and provide a service that we charge for. But it's not a massive part of our funding.
Thank you, David. Do you want to come back?
I was just going to say one last point. Is there any potential to increase that income in the future? You mentioned sort of specialist services, occupational health and HR. Is there any potential to increase income by offering those services to external organisations?
I think, if I can come back, if that's okay, Commissioner, I think that there's a small amount of opportunity there. It's not, and I've been looking at this for a number of years. It's not necessarily a material amount. What I do get quite excited about is the prospect of working more closely with the police, because if we use our estate more efficiently and more effectively, what that does, it actually reduces the cost of the police operating their estate. But in order to use the fire estate, they're obviously they provide some funding that comes into fire as well. So I think in terms of, for me, I'd really like to say, yeah, I really want to support the Commissioner's estate strategy, because it not only does it reduce the cost for policing, but it brings significant amounts of revenue in for the fire and rescue service as well.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Keith. I think this is for me, the most significant advantage of having a commissioner over the two services, that both services have benefited. There are more officers, more firefighters as a result of the collaboration between police and fire, because we're making better use of estates principally, but also shared services. It's an absolute no-brainer, and the more the better. And the public absolutely understand that it's better value for money. For me, of more consequence, and this is perhaps jumping the gun, is where I've talked before about a fire service for tomorrow and why it's so important in my plan. I believe there are significant opportunities for income for this service in providing services to others. Now, whether that is possibly supporting the ambulance service, possibly supporting the NHS with things like vaccination programmes, public health programmes, there will be a transfer of funds there. And whether it's seen as grants or income, there's definitely an opportunity for that professionalism and experience to be used elsewhere in the public estate. And I think it would be to the benefit of the whole public purse if we can do that. So I'm really pushing on to say that we've got something that can make a significant difference outside of the traditional world of fire and rescue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any more questions before we adjourn to make our decision? No? So if we adjourn for 5 or 10 minutes? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. I'm pleased to say it's gone through as a unanimous decision. Thank you very much for your presentations and all that. And why I've been standing there looking at thin air. I could have put this on, couldn't I? Knowing exactly where we were. There we go. So are we ready for the next section? Your Fire and Rescue Service Safety Plan 2020-2024 Update Report. Please, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an update on the safety plan. It's got a fancier name than that, the Integrated Risk Management Plan, which is a legal requirement. I think this update's notable because it makes a number of references to how the service has responded to COVID internally, but also in terms of what it's been able to do further afield. And on page 86, it's just worth reminding ourselves that they've delivered the vaccines to some harder to engage communities. They went out onto fruit farms, into some traveller communities, homeless, and also some of the Afghan evacuees who've been supported in hotels in the county. They've done surge testing. They've opened up fire premises, stations for vaccinations, and also supported with the winter flu vaccination as well. My understanding is actually that the flu impact on the NHS this winter has been much lower than was forecast, so that's really been good news. I also note on page 89 reference to water safety, a new approach in terms of making people more aware, not only of not going into open waters, but how best to help themselves if they're getting into difficulty or help others. That continues to be a big problem around the county. Got quite a few open water spaces. And below that there's a reference to the fire standards. I was asked myself to join the fire standards board a few weeks ago. This is an interesting piece of work, and it's essentially going to meet the challenge of the Windsor report to provide ways of comparing services, setting out what good performance is, and as a result of the first round of inspections. It's one of those things you ask yourself, well, how can a service like this not have standards? It's now getting them, and it's getting them very quickly, and it's to the benefit of everybody. The protection prevention absolutely remains key to us. Notable, I think, at the bottom of page 91, there's some reference there to always being around to help and support businesses to operate safely, but we are taking legal action as well. There's been a few cases of enforcement. We've got a slightly different attitude to that, which I think is appropriate, around organisations doing what they should be doing and only being given so many opportunities to do it voluntarily. It actually sets a very clear message out for others when regulations are not followed properly. I mentioned earlier about sprinklers, so the collaboration with Midland Heart is over the page, and I note there's been some significant progress. A couple of high-storey buildings in Lichfield, one in Hensford, and Stoke-on-Trent are continuing to get through their 18 high and medium rise blocks with retrofitted sprinklers. And you'll recall that we had a visit from a parliamentary working party. They were very impressed with what was going on at Stoke. At that meeting, we had the MP who was tragically attacked and killed, who was there. David Amos. Yeah. Smiling in the back of all those pictures as he was encouraging everybody to do the right thing, as was his wont. Notable, I think, then going on to public confidence, we've got some raw data here. Not much movement in the total number of incidents. This is on page 93, but you'll see that primary fires slightly up, secondary fires somewhat down, and different calls for different sorts of activity. So the service has been pretty much as busy as it was last year. I think the one that's notable there is the road traffic collisions, and we've all seen the roads get increasingly busier now lockdown has lifted, and very unfortunately that's resulting in the requirements to go to collisions. The accidental dwellings, there are still fires in houses. They are still largely related to cooking and faulty equipment, and you will have seen quite a bit on social media about that recently. Thankfully, during this particular spell, April to September last year, there were no fatalities. I think after this term, unfortunately, there has been, but the numbers remain very low, and that's the ambition of everybody. Similarly, with people killed in road incidents, we'll perhaps return to that with one of the police reports in the future. There's been 2 or 3 people lost, unfortunately, in the last couple of months. Safe and well visits, you'll notice that's considerably down. We were running at exceptionally high numbers. 14,000 back in 2019, 3,400-ish in this 6-month spell. Interestingly, for board members, or panel members, the number we're doing during COVID is still greater than most other authorities do anyway. So we've got a terrific record here, but there's a real ambition to be more targeted and more focused on which properties we go to talk to. Another reason for working closely with health is we'd like to know where the most vulnerable people are, those who are unlikely to have friends, relatives, or the capacity to check their own smoke alarms, check their safe, check their appliances, their gas fires, things like that are safe. HMI, there's a reference here to HMI. I was happy to agree with the Chief Fire Officer at the time that we asked HMI in a little earlier than they might have originally planned to come to us. This is on page 95. There had been a number of, small number, but a number of concerns raised by some members of staff, and it meant that HMI were in a position to assist us and give an independent view on some of these questions of people-related practices. So they came in from July, really thorough process. I was very impressed, actually, and this is only the second time that HMI have been round all the fire services. The senses from the first round, a lot of services perhaps got better results than they might have done if that was not the first time. And looking at the results of assessments, inspections in this next round, a number of services are being marked down. I don't want to prejudge. It mentions here the hot debrief, which is an opportunity to get a sense of what the inspectors were finding. But I think we will be hard-pressed to achieve quite so many goods as we did last time. What I'm really pleased about is we had a very clear steer on 1 or 2 things, and the organisation is already working to address those, already was working even before the visits, actually. And we'll know for sure in the summer, June perhaps, for the published report, and no doubt we'll talk about that again at this meeting. We're still very lucky. We've got an excellent service. Its primary provision is top class. There's reference here to the State of Fire report. I've mentioned that earlier. That's the Windsor report. We're looking for the white paper to follow. I'm very hopeful that it will recommend operational independence for fire services, which means the relationship between myself as Commissioner and the fire will be the same as it is with police. It's a little bit odd as Commissioner also being employer. I think it gets in the way of some of the discussions and debates And I think the Commissioner's role needs to be to hold the service to account, not actually act as the employer. So I'm looking forward to that change. And we've got references at the bottom of page 97 to service reform. Again, much encouraged by the Windsor Report, government progress, but also, as I mentioned to you, I think a real appetite from frontline firefighters and staff to be able to use their skills in ever more areas. So it's a good report, a comprehensive report, quite narrative heavy. My only concern about it is that it doesn't at this point reflect some of the nuance and change of direction that's in my recent plan, and that's down to timing. So the next update you'll see, I think, will be more formally structured about the 4 priorities in the recent plan. But as you know, the fundamentals about keeping us safe are there, and they were there in the previous plan as well. I'll just finally reference on page 102, there's a specific mention of Grenfell. We're still working through that, but phase 1, 97 recommendations from Grenfell. Significant, and the service is already working a lot of these into its everyday practice. But the white paper will also make some of those obligatory responsibilities and legal requirements. So we're looking to cement that in as well. Mostly around high buildings, of which there are few in Stoke and Staffordshire, but still enough to know that we're on top of all of that. So that's a whiz through, Chairman. Happy to take any questions on the safety plan.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It was really comprehensive. I like listening to you talk. It brings lots and lots of things together. It's something that I mentioned a few meetings back. We could use some of our ex-firemen in the rural areas especially to go round and check on these people that you mentioned, the elderly, checking things out. If we can get that moving, it would be lovely. Anne Edgeler, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for that comprehensive report. Councillor Anne Edgeler, standing in for Stafford Borough. I'd like to say, actually, and make a comment, I'm dealing with one individual with hoarding and that, and can I say a big thank you to the fire service for the work that they're working with me on it to try and help this person sort their problems out and hopefully prevent a fire starting within that area. So thank you for that. And also, can I also say, I'll put my health hat on for a minute from the County Council and say a very big thank you to the work that you've done with the COVID situation and all the work that's ongoing. And it's good to hear the Commissioner saying that you're working more in the future with the health and what have you. So thank you for that. But my question to you really is, what relationship do you have with Housing Plus? Because I had a situation a few months ago where a bungalow caught fire, and I arrived there in the area, and the fire people there were really concerned because it took them 2 hours to get in touch with Housing Plus. You know, so I wonder if that relationship, and compliments to the fire chief fire officer, because Rob Barber, he did write to them and that, really concerned about the situation. So I wonder what working relationship you do have with them and what we can improve it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Through you. The Housing Plus, is that a housing association? Yes. Yeah. And the relationships that... Yeah, and was that a housing association property, was it? Yes. And they got some problems accessing it or something like that? Yeah.
It was going up in flames, and the person had to get out, but it took them 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon to get hold of anybody from Housing Plus.
what I'd like to do, Anne, is just learn a little bit more about that. I'll speak to the Chief Fire Officer myself. Those relationships, traditionally with councils, and a number do still own their own and run their own housing estate, but also with housing associations is really important, especially around access plans to multi-occupancy buildings, blocks of flats, things like that. It's really, really important. And did you mention hoarding before?
I did,
Yes.
yes, which is another problem.
It's a very significant problem. There was an unfortunate incident in the Moorlands only a couple of months ago, and I believe that that was part of the problem, resulted in somebody losing their life. Not only do the buildings potentially go up very quickly because they're full of fuel, but the firefighters can't get in because you can't get through corridors and through buildings. So it's known to be a high-risk issue. And your point, Chairman, about vulnerable people, it's not just looking at health statistics, the physical. Can somebody get out of the window? Can they get up and down the stairs? What's the situation in terms of that? But also sometimes mental health, and where there is a high risk like that. And I would like that information to be directing our visits far more than a blanket sweep of an area. Let's go to where we know people are likely to be more at risk.
Yes, certainly can.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I mean, I am meeting with Martin Weaver, have I got the right name, next week regarding this person and looking at what can be done. So thank you for that. And also Rob Barber is aware of the Housing Plus situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks for that. Thanks for the answer, Commissioner. I do feel, though, some of these housing associations do actually have their own, can I say, their own ideas, but they do not liaise with fire or police. And we've had it also with ambulances, that they cannot get an ambulance to some of the places that these housing associations have. I would really, really appreciate it if, Commissioner, you could sort of nominate a fire officer or whatever to take on that role and contact all the housing associations, because I don't know how many there is in Staffordshire. I've got no idea. It could be something we could work on together and sort of pull it all together to find out what's happening with these people. Again, ambulances, big thing these days, come from all the West Midlands. They're not how they used to be. You can't just jump on the phone and get one. Waiting times have gone through the roof. But if these things, as I suggested earlier, volunteers go round, if you notice these things, you can have a word with the housing association. Again, I'm piling stuff onto you, Commissioner, I'm very sorry. Have we got any more questions? Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, Councillor Brian Jones, Cannock Chase District Councillor. Thanks for this report, Commissioner. I really enjoyed reading it. I think we can go back in time where we thought the fire service just attended fires, then they progressed to preventing fires, and now we've got a whole raft of things that they're doing. I think the thing you've just referred to, Chairman, is an operational decision for Rob Barber in terms of all those housing associations, and I'm sure they're probably looking at that, but hopefully the Commissioner will take that forward. But I think the level of stuff and work that's being done with COVID-19 is absolutely fantastic. Those hard-to-reach communities. I think also I'm seeing with both the appointment of the new Chief Constable Chris Noble and the Chief Fire Officer Rob Barber, there's clearly a synergy between those two gentlemen. You can see it within the work here with the item on page 99 about the flu vaccination clinics done for both police officers and fire officers, and just work internally. I'm really impressed with the leadership that's coming. So it's not a specific question, but just a big thank you for what the fire service is now able to do, and in terms of how wide their remit is, rather than perhaps back in the day when, if they weren't attending fires, they were in the station, but clearly that's not happening, so I'm really pleased. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Adrian, please.
Hi again, Adrian Bowen, Independent. The report makes reference to a serious fire in business premises in 2020, where the business owner hadn't taken the necessary steps, having changed the purpose of the building, and somebody was seriously injured. And just before that, it makes mention that the fire service regularly inspects business premises. Or regular could be once a week or once a year. I'm not asking for numbers, I'm trying to understand, A, does the service have a formal responsibility to inspect premises on a particular basis? But bearing in mind there are thousands of premises obviously across the county, the question B is, if that is the case, is there then an audited, monitored programme to deliver those checks? Thank you.
Chairman, I don't know the actual required schedules. I would imagine it's a bit like environmental health visits, and it's risk-based. It'll be on different for different types of building and organisation. In the case you mentioned that's in the paper, as I understand it, a business premises changed to offering residential rental spaces. So they'd actually got people living and sleeping in a building that was essentially approved and regulated for manufacturing. And thank goodness nobody lost their life as a result of that. The fire service is involved whenever there's changes of conditions like that. And one of the things I'm expecting in the white paper is actually a return to the fire service being more involved in building regulations, planning approvals, in the way that it was 2 or 3 decades ago. I think it's a step back in the right direction. It won't be welcome to every housing developer or business, but the ambition is to make these places safer and help people do that. So what I can do, Chairman, is to perhaps answer that question about schedules and how it's prioritised around business visits, and share that back with the panel outside the meeting.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Adrian. Keith, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Keith Walker, Independent Member. With the retrofitting of sprinklers, I see that the fire service has committed to match funding one of the installations. Can you explain the rationale for that? And hasn't that set precedent for other private landlords to expect similar match funding for their schemes?
So,
David, just a second.
Sorry.
Could you repeat that question, please, Keith? I could hardly hear it up here. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. With the retrofitting of sprinkler systems, the fire service has committed to match funding one of the installations. And the question is, what is the rationale for the fire service match funding an installation at a private landlord? And has that set a precedent for other private landlords to expect similar match funding?
Thank you, Keith. David, sorry to have interrupted you.
I've been educated.
Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you. Keith, you draw my attention to something. I didn't realise that we did support the investment. It's done deliberately to try and encourage organisations to come forward. This is primarily a programme around higher buildings at the moment. I understand we might have spent up to £50,000 a year in some cases on this. It's not a huge amount, but it's to match fund and encourage organisations to come forward. Having piqued my interest in it, I'm going to find out a bit more about that. I wonder whether it's necessary, because it's in an organisation's interests. One of the things I know was an issue, and particularly caught the eye of the visiting parliamentarians, is the cost of these programmes. Actually, they're cost effective. And then secondly, do they look awful? Is it, sort of pipes and almost like a bathroom shower in everybody's front room? And they don't doesn't need to look like that at all. So the programme is far more affordable to the organisations responsible for these buildings than they might have appreciated. And I'm not convinced that's something that we would want to be setting an expectation on around match funding. Although in some areas it might be appropriate to encourage people over the line. I'll find out a bit more.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I do appreciate you going back in time, a few decades. I can remember it. Rob, can I say, Chief Fire Officer, he's now got on board with checking plans and stuff at the planning stages. Perhaps we could get somebody from the police, Chris Noble, could have a go at seeing if we could get somebody involved like that. And yourself, of course, checking out licensed premises that they are fit for purpose, because these days a lot of them aren't, I'm sure. But thank you very much for your concerns and your interest. Anyone got any more questions, please? Thank you.
Councillor Tina Clements, substitute for Tamworth Borough Council. Not a question really, just more of a comment. I'm a NHS responder volunteer and I was part of the vaccination programme in Tamworth. And we had a very distressed young lad, young adult come in, autistic, ADHD. He was never going to have that jab in his arm. Parents were with him until he sat on the fire station, on the fire engine itself. And they were able to get the jab into him without him even knowing, because he was playing with all the buttons, took his mind off it. So I just wanted to place on record my thanks for the work that the fire service has done. And as already been mentioned, you know, they're not just there to put out fires anymore. They are a trusted brand. We said this when we sat on when the fire authority, you know, everybody trusts the fire officer, fireman, fire lady, whatever they're called these days. And they're a trusted brand, so when you see them, people are going to go to them. They're going to trust them. And this lad was this young man was just terrified, but this fire officer put his mind at ease. He was playing with all the buttons, setting off all the sirens. Jab went in his arm, didn't even know, went out quite happy. So well done to the fire officer on that day, because it's one more jab in an arm.
Thank you for your comments. It's very good. Well, we go to item 8, which is strange. It's questions to the PFCC by panel members. Have we got any questions? Just one. Councillor Edgeley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make a comment on the Commissioner's last comments about intervening with the planning system. I sit on Stafford Borough Planning Committee, so I really welcome any intervention from the fire service and that in any planning decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Angela. He's now working with the district, so I think a short email to Rob will get him involved and he'll move it on. Thank you very much. Commissioner, anything else? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask you a question, Commissioner, about the Staffs and Stoke-on-Trent Strategic Community Safety Forum, which you yourself introduced, and I attended on the 4th of February, which was the inaugural meeting. Both Chief Fire Officer, Chief Constable there, with leaders from Stoke-on-Trent and across the piece. I, for one, found that really interesting to get all those key players in the room, and there was some great discussions, and I just wondered if what you yourself thought about that initial meeting and the value of it, and if you'd received any feedback from other people who attended.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for your contribution to the meeting. It was well attended. I think of most relevance to today is it gave the Chief Fire Officer in particular an opportunity to speak directly to the incoming Chief Executive of the new integrated care system. So this is the Chief Exec for £2.7 billion of NHS spending in the county, and ask him just to really appreciate what the fire service can do around assisting in prevention, vulnerable people, maybe some frontline health provision. So it was really important to me that he had that opportunity. Equally, the Chief Constable, he's got some asks of those services. How can we work more closely on mental health? How can we work more closely on issues related to addiction? And I particularly valued that conversation about the new drug strategy, treatment strategy that's coming down the line. So we won't be doing that every time, but I certainly think once a year we need everybody with an interest in community safety to have an opportunity to challenge each other. And actually, we've all got an interest. You know, whether you're leading on infrastructure, housing, health, or education, you have an interest in community safety. People don't come and live in places they don't feel safe. They don't do well at school if they don't feel safe. And we need to be focusing on the people with health risks if we're going to help keep them safe. So I really thought it was a useful first go at a pan-Staffordshire meeting like that. We've not done it before. Got some work to do now because we've got a work programme on ASB, a work programme around the drug strategy, and we'll see if we can actually get some action. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any more? No? The last item on the agenda, of course, date of future meetings and the work programme. And I have one more question for you later. Andy?
Your next scheduled meeting was the 22nd of February. That was a reserved date in case it was needed if you didn't agree to the precepts for either police or fire. So I'll be cancelling that later today. So your next scheduled meeting is the 25th of April.
Thank you, Mandy. So, Commissioner, we will be looking forward to your monitoring report on the 21st of October, giving us a little bit more information around the £2 million savings. Is that okay with you, sir? Yep, okay, thank you for that. So all that's left for me to do, sitting on this chair, which is most uncomfortable, is they haven't altered it in one little bit. Since the last time I kept shuffling on a piece of wood, is to say thank you all for attending. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much for your time.